Josh, we're ready to go. Say, hey, how you doing this morning?
Good morning, everybody. So, trying to leave off from last meeting, we talked about some. Well, let me say this first, I guess. So we got through general fund. We need to hit fire service fund, water fund are the big ones. Stormwater, development services. I think we can probably get through those today.
Stick into your thing.
But I have a list of, we talked about last week, one-time expenditures, so I'm going to pass that to you all.
Do you have that for the public to see?
Let's see if I can open it up here. Okay. So if you look at this, what I've tried to do is kind of pull out everything that was more of the, the bigger kind of one-time thing. I know we went back and forth about trucks and different things. Those aren't necessarily one time. It depends on the department and how often they're going to need a new vehicle. So I've just thrown them in here as one time, like the F-250 and F-450. Those aren't something that are recurring every year, but that they may happen more often than a renovation of something. But I've got those in here. I've also got, the first two items, police cars and body cameras. They are counted in that total, but I did propose and recommend a budget to take out debt for those two items. You do have the pickleball courts in here, the renovation of Gray Eagle, which would be the roof, the lighting, and the turf. Those two trucks I just mentioned. We also talked about rollout cans. The dam is in here for the dam repair. The van for Parks and Rec, which that's. I think the van we have now, we've had for a long, long time. So that's, it's going to be a while before they order another van or need another van. Full-size work truck also for Parks and Rec. That's going to be probably quite a few years before they're going to need another one of those. We've also got the master plan, recreation master plan in here. Cragmont Park, the trail down there, the whole amount, 160. Bike Boulevard as well. And then I did not put water fund on here. I think it's a little bit separate, but we know we have the large project on Highway 70 we're currently working on, and the future projects that we're going to be reaching out to a consulting firm to help us get some grant funding for couple of those future larger projects, being water lines on Montreat Road and NC9. For development services, the bigger things were the sidewalk this year for Charlotte Street, and then of course the 9 sidewalk, 100,000 for that one, 65,000 for the Charlotte Street, and then jumping over to fire services would be the chief truck, an ATV replacement, I guess the parking lot, if you will, or the apron in front of the fire truck bays. And then engine 43 at 450,000. So those are, excuse me, the larger one-time kind of expenditures for this this budget that we've talked about, I guess, for a number of meetings now, different types of things. But I know that was talked about last week, so I wanted to get that out to you so you can just put your eyes on the numbers and see what they look like. And we pull them all out and take a look at them.
Josh, would you mind quickly note which ones were built into the budget that you proposed here? Several of you already are right now.
So this is going to be, let's see here. Part of the Gray Eagle was built into that budget. The turf was not, but the roof and the lighting were. So I think that was about $95,800 that was built in. Both those trucks were built in. The rollout cans were not.
Oh, this through the numbers for us on both.
Okay, sorry. So the Gray Eagle roof and lighting, like I said, 95.8. The F-450, 85,000. The F-250, 52,500. The 15 passenger van at 42,000. The full-size work truck at 26,000. The recreation master plan at 60,000. Crabmont Park Trail, there was a portion of that funded, and I'm thinking it was around 15,000. It wasn't the whole 160. Excuse me. And the Bike Boulevard was also programmed in at 32,000, as well as the Charlotte Street sidewalk at 65,000 was programmed in. And then for the fire, the chief truck was programmed in, and I believe the ATV replacement was programmed in. The other two are not.
The police cars and the body cams.
They're programmed in now as debt.
And then the Tomahawk Dam is already committed through ARP funds, right?
That's right.
What is the water line? Is it $500,000 as well?
Well, that's what we've anticipated is $500,000 for that as well. So that would be $1 million out of your existing 1.3 that we have. We're still waiting on that next payment from federal government of 1.3.
So if we take out Tomahawk Dam, that's already been committed in separate funds, and Rock cams, which are not yet committed, that's $1 million less than the total here in the general fund, right? Pretty much everything else was committed, either through debt or.
The pickleball courts were not committed, but for the most part, everything else were a piece of the other two, like the Gray Eagle. Not all of that was fully funded, or the Cragmont Park Trail was fully funded either. So if, at this point, we can go whatever direction y'all choose to go. I would suggest that we try to make our way through a couple of these other funds and get those done. It's completely up to y'all.
Well, that's how what we were going to do today, to start and finish up and do fire,
Water's a big one.
water.
Golf's pretty small. We can hit stormwater, which is also pretty small, but we've got those in there as well.
Sound good to everybody?
All right. Excuse me. So on your fire, if you have your lovely book in front of you, that starts on page 49. But I think the big details are over on 50 and 51. So on your revenues, which would be page 50, this is what we've got in here for revenues this year. This being, when I say revenues, we operate, not only do we operate the city limits fire district, we also have the East Buncombe Fire District that we do operate and are in charge of. We get Buncombe County sales tax for that area, as well as ad valorem tax or property tax. And you can see those two numbers combined are about just a little over 1.5 million. You'll see those in that chart there. The ad valorem being 1,058,750, and then the sales tax being 451,510. All that brings the total in, and we also have a transfer in from general fund. And I know I've talked about this a little bit. Transfer in from general fund really, typically we like to see a half and half split from county funds and town funds, because the calls are about a half and half split when you do the math of our service calls being in the district versus inside city limits. So we've transferred in that amount of 1,057,415, which brings the total for the fire department budget to 2.629675 million. Now looking over at your the line item budget where we budget everything out, I talked about some of this, try to get the high points in my budget message. And I am looking for that now, bear with me just a second. So we did not have any new positions in there. We talked about the cost of living, of course, that's broken down in here in that amount. There is some increases in the operating costs for uniforms, maintenance, supplies, and fuel. That being $52,000 total budgeted for uniforms and turnout gear, and we've increased supplies. That new line is $25,200, and that's really due to the increases in everything we're seeing across the board as far as costs. Getting up the side story, we had a fire hydrant that got hit. Luckily, we were able to, I think, save it and not have to buy a new fire hydrant. But just to give you an example, fire hydrants before the pandemic were about a little over $1,000 a piece. Now they're over $3,000 a piece. So it just keeps going and going. But the capital in the fire department fund that was recommended, it shows $100,000 being transferred to the capital reserve fund, and we've done that for a number of years to buy trucks, and there's also a portion of it that is set aside for some building renovations over at the fire department. $75,000 for the new chief vehicle, and then for equipment, they've asked specifically for $56,200, and that is things such as radios, headsets, gym equipment, and new tools for them that they need. So that's really that's your fire department fund, fire services fund.
Any questions for Josh on that before we move on?
Not the fire department in general, or just that particular page?
I think the fire department in general would be fine.
So I'm skipping ahead to page 145. And it's a capital improvement project around remodeling the quarters for the fire station. And could you walk us through, I wasn't quite clear. I believe we have $200,000 in a future budget. But then up in here in the description, it says that some money has already been set aside, and I wasn't clear if that money was in addition to the 200 or if it was part of the 200.
So to answer that question, that money would be, the 200 that's shown in here would be in addition to the money that's already been set aside for that renovation. And I think that the money that's been set aside is around $200,000 now that we have in that capital reserve fund. Now, I'll say this, in a future or a past board, we had this discussion, and we did have the engineer come back in and take another look at the building to make sure things were safe, there were no immediate needs or immediate issues, and that was in fact the case, that it is not in any kind of danger of sinking into an underground cavern or whatever it may be underneath the fire department, but it is not in any danger at all. And I think, just speaking with the last chief, we had talked about the potential for just holding off on that until we see. We really want to do like an entire facilities needs study with every building in town to see how it looks, how we're going to grow in the future, what do we need to do. I think the hesitation from administration or staff would be, if we end up needing to do something different with that fire department, how much do we want to sink into it right now for those updates? So that's kind of where we've landed with it.
So that's why you put it in a future and not a specific fiscal year.
That's correct.
So if we need to do a holistic look at all the town buildings, are you thinking we would do that in the next year or two, or is that something that's just kind of something we want to do?
No, I know that the fire chief, the police chief and I have talked about it. I know he has interest in for his building. I have interest in, especially this building. I think Parks and Rec and Public Works are probably fine. It's a newer building, they've moved in, but probably still needs to be looked at as well. But I would think probably the next budget, not this one we're working on now, but the next one. So 23, 24.
Anyone else on fire?
So what We have a fair amount of overtime in the salaries. Although it's going down, that's a good thing, but to what do we attribute that? I'm coming back on page 51, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Is that just common how fire department?
You know, well, I mean, I don't know that it's common. I wouldn't specifically say it's fire departments. I think, you know, we do have overtime that's accumulated in some other departments. You know, this one specifically shows it. I think that, you know, that reasoning, I don't know that, and Scotty explained this before, you know, when you have people that take off, and you have vacations, or you maybe have someone out for FMLA, there's just not a lot of, there's not other employees to pull from.
Right.
So that's why some of the firemen do work overtime and get that extra money and cover those shifts for us, because we just don't have the extra staff to be able to do that when those things happen.
So is this going to be one of the things we address with our staffing study, that
I
do
think
we have enough positions in the fire department?
that would be part of that and come up in that. That's correct. Across the board.
You have 25,000 budgeted for this year.
That's right.
Is that 2% of the total salaries? Wages, looks like it.
Probably close.
1.2.
Yeah, let's call that.
So I don't know if that's in line or not, because you probably got to have some just for people that have vacations and
I mean, I
visits
was
and so forth.
trying to drill down and see if it's a chronic problem that needs to be addressed with staffing needs.
You know, for example, right now, we have some issues where we've got somebody out on potential disability, so they can't work. We also have someone going out that is having, their wife's having a baby, and we've got someone who's going to be going out on surgery. So, you know, you have those types of things that just happen. They just come, and you know, you're not necessarily prepared for those all the time.
Right. But in the fire department, you can't really just not have people there.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have so many people to be able to run the shift in a safe fashion.
And to keep our firefighters safe.
That's correct.
We approved those 2 new positions last year, but my understanding is that we were never like fully staffed. Are we fully staffed now?
I know I had asked that.
I'm going to let Chief Coffee respond to you on that one, but I'll say I think it was 3. We did 3 new positions. We added 3, one for each shift.
One for each shift. Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
So we just recently hired.
If you sit in front
Oh,
of
sorry.
So from the last week when I spoke to you, we were going through the hiring process. We did offer jobs to 2 of the candidates. One starts tomorrow, the other one starts on the 17th. So those 2 shifts will have full staffing, but as the town manager addressed that, we have one that's out on medical disability. We're waiting for him to fully separate from the town before we can hire that shift, that position, that shift. We do have some still applications rolling in, so I anticipate us hopefully having a full shift on all 3 shifts by the end of this fiscal year. So everything goes as planned.
Now, when you say full shift, how many people does that mean on that shift?
That'll be 7. That'll be 3 at each station plus the battalion chief.
Okay.
Now, obviously, we're still going through the chief's position and and then as town manager also said, I've got 3 employees that are going to be going out for different reasons. One's for surgery, one's for maternity leave, and possibly another maternity leave. So we're trying to beef up our part-time pool as well.
I had asked before, I think when you presented to us a week ago, were you fully staffed and had the staff to do exactly what you needed to do? What do you need to be able to cover that? Because that's something that you're going to have to plan for. What do you see that you need in order to be able to cover something like that?
So right now, to be fair, this is only my 2nd month as a board here, so it's still a learning curve for me on the needs. I'm relying heavily on the battalion chiefs for input on their past experiences with staffing issues. So as as soon as we get all 3 shifts filled, then we'll be able to assess that further and see if those needs are. But it's a little premature to do that. We'll really see what needs to be done right now.
When you're short, because of maternity leave or whatever it may be, or injury, that's overtime. Something. Is that's just out
If we can't get part-time for this.
Yeah. How is a part-time supply?
It varies because of the firefighter schedule. Like I looked at the part-timers we have, and there's A, B, and C shift, and that schedule is pretty universal. So anyone that works A shift today is working A shift in other states, A shift across the county. There's a lot of part-time employees that work a particular shift and not another. So if they all come from A shift, well, obviously they can't work for A shift here because they're on duty at full-time. So I do have that issue with a couple shifts.
Able to, within the county in particular, communicate pretty clearly and get pretty good response when you know that you need to cover, and I know probably our folks do likewise. Does that happen pretty seamlessly?
It
You're looking
can be a
for the
challenge
part-time?
sometimes, depending on the time of the year as well.
Yeah.
Right now, we're at the time of year where everyone's taking vacation everywhere, so part-time tends to take down.
You got the part-time salary and wages. It's just in salary and wages, right?
No, it is, it's the one right under it there.
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's a little more substantial. That's more like 10%.
You know, and the chief can speak better than I can to it, but the volunteer pool it's just not what it once used to be.
Right,
The volunteers, you know,
right.
it's hard to get the volunteers.
I'm sure.
That's a nationwide trend.
I'm sure it is. I guess you get, I mean, with the folks with part-time help that come from other stations and departments, you think it's better training and they're just more ready to get the job and so forth. So I'm sort of curious, and I wouldn't know this, but I'm sort of curious, we're at about 10% part-time, if that's how consistent that is elsewhere in the county. I don't mean just with municipalities, but with other fire districts and stations and so forth.
We're pretty fortunate as far as the part-time availability. I know other departments are struggling.
Yeah.
So.
Good. Whether they'd like to come to Black Mountain.
Yes, that is the case.
You know, a lot of our part-timers are, for example, you have people that may work at Swan and Oak Fire Department full-time, but they may come here.
Right.
So, I think that's very common in fire service, working for multiple
You work with
stations.
your neighbors, you're comfortable with those neighbors.
Yeah.
You tend to want part-time positions available.
Any other questions for the chief?
No, I'll just comment that, I mean, I know we're gonna look at this in greater depth in the coming months, all the salary situations, but for this year's budget, over the projected total and the department request is up $400,000 in the personnel salaries and associated benefits and taxes. So I appreciate that our staff has made some inroads on addressing these salary issues. That's not a question. That was just it was an observation that I just wanted to say out loud.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you,
So we're good on fire for now. Let's go ahead and do the other big one, which will be water. So on your, let's see, on your revenue, water fund revenue, you have got, so with our, you'll see specifically on water sales, we're going to be up. That's including that percentage that was presented to us by the consulting firm that did our water study. I think it's 6%. That is including that increase in percentage for, to go up on our water rates. And I will say, with that being said, I have had a discussion with Withers Ravenel about that, about what they can perform for us and what they can do for us. They're really, they focus on grant writing, essentially, that's what they do. So I have talked with Freddie Harrell about them doing that for us, and we're trying to set the meeting now to get them to come talk to us. They don't do anything. I know there was some conversation, at least between you and I, about them potentially doing some general assembly stuff, but they don't get into that. So it's just grant stuff.
I doubt they have time to do it right.
But they do perform that service, and I think they're pretty successful in that service as well.
Josh, tell me what they do.
So Withers Ravenel, they do engineering, they
I
do,
know it's a big firm.
they do planning, they do Parks and Rec master plans, they would do different types of planning documents, they do grant writing, utilities, that sort of thing,
So
engineering.
we're talking about using them for grant writing for us for this.
For water projects, yes.
For water, that's what I'm talking about.
That's correct.
Okay.
There's a lot of money that came through this ARPA stuff into some of these grant pools, and it's going to be competitive like it always is. But I think with them having the knowledge and having done so many of them, I think it would be worth our while to entertain what they've got to say and potentially put something together for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's just what they do. That's kind of what their specialty is. So.
Sure.
So what we have the total right now for revenue, 2.2497. So $2,249,700 for the water fund revenue. So it's up a little bit from last year, of course, because we're adding 6% to the water rates, at least proposing to. And
Water rates for City of Ashland water. So what you mean?
this would be our water rates across the board. We're going to raise it 6%.
On hourly.
That's
What
right.
about City of Ashland?
What did they say? They are raising, as far as what they're charging us, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
They are not raising our full purchase rate, according to David Bell. I will say that, as far as the water goes with Asheville, we purchase that water, of course, now. We purchase more water than we have in the past, because we've taken over, we'll have, at the end of the day, 600 actual customers. Right now, we're probably 450, a little higher. And we're working on that last phase, which is part of the capital for this fund, this upcoming year. But, with that being said, you'll notice in that specific line on the water fund where we do the co-op purchases for water, I got it on the screen there, line number 14, that's just went up, right, for us over the years. We're buying more water from Asheville, and I am, just to be honest, I'm anal about water leaks now more than I've ever been, because every leak now I think costs us more money because we're buying water from Asheville. So Jamie could attest to that I'm usually on him weekly about water leaks. So every time I see water,
Those pieces of equipment.
we've got 2 in, we're still waiting on the other 2.
So we need 2 more.
I need 2 more, and I may just have those 2 put in now and just go ahead and do it. And start just recording data on those 2.
Well, Jamie can speak to it, but if he needs to, but there could be a downside to go ahead and put in the 2 that you have in.
I think so.
Have any idea on when the other 2 are coming? Any idea?
We speak to our reps weekly, and just going back to what Josh was talking about, the hydrants, I was talking to them, we've been waiting on 4 hydrants for almost 4 months now, and they can't tell you when they're gonna come in. Water lines a year out, we're fortunate enough to have some in the stockpile, and when we ask about those meters, it's the same, they're waiting, they don't even know when they're manufacturers, they're sort of in limbo too.
So yeah, so the water leaks are something that we're, at least I'm more aware of than I've ever been, and more concerned about that. Yeah.
We have to. So you could at least maybe put the 2 if you have any data or just any, if it's just a guess, even as to where you think the problems might be, and you kind of address them.
Yeah.
What's the installation time on it? Is that pretty complicated?
It's more or less just finding the line and then put like a direct tap into that line. It's not, the installation is a little bit more than making a water tap. You could probably do it, in a day, in a worse scenario situation, in a day.
So I'm gonna go real quick to the, just the budget message. So just talking, it's about a 10% increase from last year across the board as far as the water fund itself goes, from fiscal year 21-22. We do have a new position in this water fund, that I haven't mentioned before. This would be a position that would be working in the back here at customer service. Now, the 56,000 isn't going to be totally in the water fund. Part of that money will be out of general fund because they are going to be, this position is going to be responsible for more of a centralized collection payment type system that we don't have in place now, where we've got multiple departments taking payments. And it just, I think, auditing purposes and efficiency, I think having that in one place is going to be better for us. Of course, I mentioned we talked about the COLA. So the operating costs do increase in the water, as they have pretty much in every fund, about $195,000, and this is supplies. I've also got it here about purchasing more water from Asheville, and then some increases in our contract labor costs. The capital, we've got, of course, this is our last time, hopefully, to spend money on this Asheville water line transfer. We're going to get that wrapped up. Now, the good thing about that is, I think after we get this, we're going to have that 250,000 freed up that can build fund balance again, because we need to build fund balance in water fund.
That's right, that was a recommendation from Rivers and Rathmel that we needed to be doing that.
And then the meters, that's not an every year thing. It has been for the past few years. That total cost for those meters was around $800,000 in the beginning. Now we have purchased probably over half of those, so I think we've got 3 more years of the 125. So after those 3 years, obviously that money is going to be freed up as well to do, to build fund balance or whatever, take out new debt, whatever council board decides to do with that. But so we are going to get to a place where it's not as tight as it is now. It's just, we're almost there with this water line transfer, and then using Withers and Ravenel for grant stuff. I think moving forward and trying to get some more of that grant money in here for water projects is going to be helpful.
I think it's pretty important that we all that you try to put this study. This is really, it's pretty simple and straightforward, to your budget work papers when you pull them out next year.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty long, it's really a 10-year,
Yeah, that's right.
look, but I think it's pretty well put together. And as you said earlier, it's building up the fund balance, because the way they have the capital improvements scheduled, we're building up fund balance and really trying to crank into about $2 million worth in 10 years.
Yeah, and hopefully, that we'll be able to get some grant funds.
That's the idea. I think that's just a
and it's there, I think I do think we'll be successful in getting some of those funds here. I think we can do that.
That's 1.2 for line maintenance and replacement. So we do that about $100,000 a year. So if you got over 10 years, that's what that is. The Montreat water line at 1.2 and NC9 at 1. And my question is on that, it's not for a budget, obviously it's out there, but is that just absolutely, we know that that's where most of our problems lie, Montreat Road line and number 9 line?
The reason that was planned years out is because those lines are AC. They're made out of AC material, which is some of our oldest lines in town. So eventually they will need to be replaced, because when they do start becoming a problem, it becomes a big problem considering their size and the linear footage they are.
Yeah.
And, they need to be moved to ductile iron instead of pretty much concrete material.
But right now, I think those 2 lines, we're not having a lot of issues with them.
The leaks we've had on Monterey that we fixed in the past, the line still looks in pretty good condition. We just know that they need to be replaced in the future. Number 9, we had more problems out past Phil's barbecue out that way, and that line is where most of the leaks occurred. But there again, it's AC line, and we've been, you know, when it does leak, we replace it with PVC, and, you know, it just fixes as it occurs, but eventually it will be replaced.
Any questions for Josh on water?
Let's do stormwater. Okay, so our stormwater, and this would be page, bear with me, page 65, where that starts. So for the revenues for stormwater, we are anticipating, so, you know, we did pretty good actually this year. We did a little bit less than we had budgeted, anticipated about looks like about $25,000, roughly $24,000 less, which is actually not bad at all. So we're budgeting a little bit less next year, just to try to be conservative at $355,000 for the revenue on the utility side. And we also got permits, plan review, very small amount of interest earned. Now your transfer in, the reason that's in there is that's transferring in some money from general fund. And the reason we're doing that is, as you'll see on this next page, when I show you the operations side, you'll see that salaries are quite a bit up from last year. Now, the reason that the salaries are up is because we've been able to allocate part of the positions that we currently have that are doing stormwater work and have factored that into this budget now. Whereas last year, we really didn't have that data, so we just used the stormwater technician position, if you will. But this year, we've been able to do more of the allocation-based formula and put that in there. But with that being said, what that does is it eats away at the capital money. Because now I'm putting more salary in there, and that gets rid of some of the money that we wanted to put back to capital projects out of the stormwater fund. So that is the main reason that you see that transfer in of $84,000 is to make up that amount that we're losing in our capital that we won't transfer.
So, and that's out of public works, I suppose.
Yeah, most of it,
So
true.
allocating to some public works, to water, some of the things in public works and some stormwater.
Because, they're the ones that are out cleaning the ditches, making sure storm drains are open, and that sort of thing, and any kind of other work that may need to be done, smaller scale work. So that total budget is actually an even $450,000 for the upcoming year is what we've recommended.
Is there a proposed change in the utility?
The utility is staying exactly the same. Monetarily wise, we're not charging any more funds. No.
Quick, are you done?
Yeah,
Questions for Josh on stormwater?
Were there any issues with collecting the stormwater fee this year?
Jessica, would you like to talk about that?
We've had a remarkable year collection, right? For a first year on a single bill annual, we kind of delivered this out of water. We had a similar structure. We had explored all sorts of different ways to collect, and this is the lowest cost way to collect, even though it's kind of high labor for staff. But because we want to protect our revenues as much as possible to the benefit of the program, we're still anticipating to get it.
Okay.
Our collection rate, which we'll talk about in a few times, pushing almost 90%.
And I've got, and this isn't really budget related, but in the next month or so, maybe July's or August meeting, I want Jessica and Ann, who is our stormwater technician, to come and talk to y'all and, at a meeting.
Yeah.
So the public can hear they're doing a lot of stuff.
Anyone else? Right, thank you.
And then the last one I think really of concern or of interest, I guess if you will, would be the planning department, the development services revenue. Now, I've told most of you, and I'll go ahead and mention it now, the way we have this set up now, all the building inspection fees come in and they have to all be spent in this department. So the way we have this set up now is a separate fund, a special revenue fund that allocates or accounts for those building inspection fees to come in, and those have to be spent in that department. Now, I've talked to all of y'all about I'll just say it, I mean, our building inspector is going to be retiring. So I don't know what that looks like for the future. The last time we did this, we got 0 applicants for the position. So we were able to move some things around and have someone internally that could do the position. He has now decided he's ready to go home. I don't blame him. The timing could be better, but that's where we are with it. The other option, if we don't get anybody to do this for us, we can potentially contract with someone else, or the county can take it over for us. I will say that we are, besides Montreat, who uses a contract person to do their inspections, we are the only city in the county that does our own. So the county does the building inspections for Weaverville, Woodfin, Biltmore Forest, all the other jurisdictions.
You still have to call the county in on some inspections.
We do now. So, for example, if our inspector takes vacation or he's out, then we have to coordinate with the county for them to do those inspections for us. Now, with that being said, that $300,000 you see in the building inspection fee that we have budgeted, if we end up giving that to the county, we will lose that money because the county will get that revenue. I think on the other side of that is we don't pay the county to do the service. So they do all the, they have to hire or do whatever they've got to do, but we do lose that revenue, which it's going to be it's going to be a shortfall for us, just to be honest.
What about 150?
Ish.
Half of it.
Probably about half of
We're not paying
it.
exactly.
Close. So, but I think that's a discussion for another day. I don't know where we're going to land with that one right now, and I hate to assume anything. We may get 10 applications and be able to roll on.
When you say that the building inspection fees need to stay in planning?
Yes.
Yeah, so they can be
That's
moved
correct.
around in line items. So.
Yeah. So they just need to stay in that fund. They can't be used to offset general funding.
Do you think that the salary contributed to the lack of applications, lack of interest?
I don't know the real answer. I can say the salary may be part of it. I would also say, with smaller town building inspectors, you have to have every trade, right? So a building inspector has an electrical trade. They have an electrical specialization where they can inspect electrical work. They have a plumbing. They have a mechanical, which is HVAC, things like that. They have building, which would be, structural type issues. And then sometimes they have fire. So I think you have 5, at least 4. The problem with that is that's a lot of stuff for someone to have. And at the bigger jurisdictions, they have specific people that focus on each one of those. So I think that's some of our issue, more than likely, is finding someone, one, who can afford to live here, 2, who can, have all those specialties and may or may not take a pay cut, may or may not take a pay cut, depending on where they're coming from. It's just tough, I think, right now. And just right now with the labor the way it is, it just makes it even tougher.
Yeah, I guess, as it relates to this budget, I wonder if it is salary based, it's part of the problem, and it sounds like it might not be, but if it is, if increasing the salary to help would still put us, positive for an order for us to be able to keep that.
That's a good point.
And then for this, he's also a fire inspector, so I know we talked about this yesterday, but for the public, we have a fire inspector.
So yeah, we have a part-time fire inspector now who could potentially move up to be full-time. We would probably want to backfill to have another part-time at some point, not to throw anything else off on our interim chief, but he is also able to do inspections as well. Not that he has time, but I think we're okay in the meantime until we can get folks in. And like I said, we've also spoken to the county about, providing these in the interim, should we need them. Not necessarily take it over, but help us while we look for another person to do that job. But he is not going to be retiring until, I think he's early September. He may take some time off in August, but we're going to post the position more than likely today or tomorrow and try to start getting applicants in if we can get them.
And it won't be a hybrid position either.
That's right. So yeah, right now it's kind of a higher position because of Charlie and what he does. The new position would just be building inspector position. It wouldn't be doing both fire and building.
Anyone else? Right.
So I think the big things in the planning budget really are, let's see, much better if I read from you. From my budget message. So no new positions at all. We've got the COLA increase. So the increases we have another $60,000 to pay to the consultant to finish our Unified Development Ordinance, which is moving along good. That will finish that project up. When do you think that'll be done? Hopefully December, maybe? Optimistic. So maybe a little longer than the end of the calendar year. We have our Knott Street Bridge right-of-way matching here that we're going to need for, if you recall, DOT is going to be adminning that project and essentially paying for 80% of that project on the bridge at 9th Street that needs to be replaced. And then we have Cragmont Park Phase 2 construction at $15,000. As far as the capital, we have Charlotte Street sidewalk is what I originally recommended at $65,000, and the Bike Boulevard at $32,000.
All right, questions? Jane? All right. Move on, Josh.
All right, so I don't think I've missed anything, but those are pretty much your.
Did you use golf course?
No, I did not do golf. Thank you, Larry. We got so many funds this year. It's easy to look this one.
Hopefully too long.
No, it's pretty straightforward. Let's see.
59 and hopefully.
It is. I'm going to read from. So, we increased our rates at the golf course, I guess a couple meetings ago. So that's going to help us with our green fees and our revenues this year. We're projecting around $420,000 is what we're hoping to get in green fees this upcoming year. And I would say if we continue to do the business we've been doing, that's not going to be an issue at all. Speaking with Brent, we did, I guess for the month of May, I think almost $90,000, which is just, that's really impressive. I mean, if you could do $90,000 for 12 months in a row, you're talking quite a bit of money. So that.
I think the play is not going to slow down all that much. It's the weather is the factor.
Then of course we've got our memberships in here. We've got an increase in that as well, and our golf carts. And a lot of these increases you're seeing, not only are they based on our increases in the fees, but they're also based on, during COVID, we lengthened out the tee times to try and keep separation. We've got those back down now, and Brent's doing a great job of trying to get those as exact as he can. We move people through, and the more people we can move through, the more money we're going to make over there. So we think we're set up for a big year at the golf course this year. Let's see. Contributions from general fund. So I have $29,000 that has been transferred from general fund to balance this budget. We typically do a considerable amount more than that, so I'm hopeful that we end up only using the $29,000 and don't have to offset that with anything else.
I guess everybody on council knows this is not a budget issue, but it's operational. The lease was able to get switched over to John Deere.
So that's going to be on your agenda. We'll talk about tonight. But yes, so we had issues with getting things, getting equipment, can't get any kind of updates on when they're going to get them. but John Deere was able to do that for us, so we're gonna end up switching and going with them. It's a little more expensive in the cost, which is to be expected, just because of the way things are going, but they've actually guaranteed us product.
They actually have mowers.
Yeah, so.
Any questions for Josh on more? On golf? I wanted to mention, if being none, we talked, I think, in our very first budget meeting about the bus line. And the city of Asheville requesting that we contribute $25,000. So we pulled some numbers together, and Josh, it may be in my email string here, but the cost of that line is for fiscal year 23.
That's expensive.
$463,000. Of that, the city of Asheville covers $123,935, Buncombe County $82,623, and Town of White Mountain in this fiscal year $25,000, and the other half is federal money, and it's a 50% match. So I think fairly reasonable for us to be able to put in 25 and have some skin in the game, if you will. And the ridership,
I think that was he had 18 and 19 data. I think I sent this out to everybody. I think it was between 15 and 20,000 both years. Does that sound right? Maybe more than that.
I would be a little uncomfortable saying I would ever. But anyway, we can get that. I thought it was in the same email string. So any questions, anybody, as we?
Oh, I was way off. 32,000 in 18 and almost 37,000 in 19.
Right.
A lot of people ride it.
Okay, let's hold that down.
Are you asking for questions about the budget in general?
I think so. I think that's where we are with Josh.
Yeah,
Do you have another step that you need to?
No, I mean, I think we've hit most of everything, most of every fund. I know there's been a lot of different discussions as we went through these meetings, and I would love to have some real formal direction right now. Can you
I
get
just
it?
have one more question. So this is around, it's all through the budget wherever there's a request, a capital request for a truck or whatever. For example, I'm looking at 163. It says this is to purchase a 2022 F-250 diesel crew cab. And all of them talk about purchasing diesel being all through the budget. And I just wondered if, we passed a resolution recently, and I just wondered how that was getting included in the language.
So it's not included in this language at all. I think from my perspective on what y'all passed, this is something that we will research as we go out to look for these types of vehicles. I can tell you right now, there is not an electric vehicle on the market that can do what this diesel truck can do. It's just not possible right now.
Well, I understand that there's not electric vehicles for all of our needs currently.
Right.
But it just, I guess it just bothered me a little bit to see if everything was automatically going to diesel without even a mention of electric vehicles, since that was our directive.
And if you and council would like to see that in there, I'm happy to put it in there. But I think we're going to be a ways away from diesel vehicles being able to be offset.
Yeah, I understand, and it sounds like we can't even get diesel.
Well,
we need to go to horse and buggy.
It just depends at where you are.
But just to clarify, when you buy a new vehicle, you have a policy that you're going to do a comparison, both cost and function comparison, and we'll discuss and know about it. That'll be educational for everybody.
Right. If our resolution says we would prioritize electric vehicles. So, yeah, just wanted to throw that out, that we're just totally diesel in this budget.
Yeah, and again, I mean, most of the vehicles, if they talk, if they're talked about F-250s, F-350s, I think that's just been what it is forever and ever. And I think, if there were a comparable vehicle right now that we could buy that would serve the same purpose as this F-350, we would buy it. If it was in the realm of we can't afford to do, I think, if it's 3 times the amount, that's a different conversation. But yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So I'd appreciate it, Josh, if you just go back to the general fund and tell us where you are, what budget you're recommending in general fund overall, not the details, but allocate, appropriation of fund balance, that sort of thing.
All right, so in the general fund, the recommended budget that was sent to you, I guess, May 26th. So what it shows is an offset from the unassigned fund balance appropriation of $417,000. Okay. And I know that we've had a bunch of conversations since that concerning what we want that number to be, what we want to spend the capital on, that sort of thing. What I have done, I've done some work. Since our last meeting, we talked about, I did go over the average that we typically use for fund balance appropriation throughout the past 5 years, not including the COVID years, which was around $250,000 roughly. So, the stuff I put on the one-time list that we just looked at that I gave to you, pretty much that's been pulled from capital right now, okay? The budget I have.
From capital in this budget.
From capital in this budget. So right now you have essentially $241,000 appropriated right now, but there's really no capital in that budget right now, okay? And I will also say, we talked about those motor vehicle fees, increasing that fee to get us some more revenue, which would have given us about just short of $200,000. The feelings I got when we talked about that were not sure that we want to do that. So I have backed that out. We did some research. Us and Asheville are the only ones that charge, vehicle fees in the county. So that has been backed out right now. Again, that puts us at $241,000 for this fund balance appropriation. Now, that can be more if council wants it to be more. That is where we are right now on an average based on 5 years.
Right. Well, that sounds fine. Let me ask you, and it's fine with me. But anyway, in this budget, do you have then the 200,000?
I do not. That is not in here.
Sorry, what?
200,000 for the just to kind of get ahead of the game, I think, on salaries.
You're thinking we might need that after we do the salary study to implement it?
That is not in here.
Well, we'll just probably have, if we have to appropriate it, then we'll appropriate it.
Well, yeah, that's.
I think the concern was that it was gonna put us below the 30%, right?
It depends on how much you want to appropriate.
That is, I think we have to see what we have.
Yeah, because I was burning to do that last time.
I think we have to see what we can, if we can't fit it in this budget. I remember we got 2 salaries in this budget, 2 new salaries, two new employees in admin in this budget, correct?
And you have the 3 policemen too.
3 policemen.
Yeah.
Well, I think the 3 policemen, you have to have 1 a shift, and I think I think we could also, if we needed to, look for contract labor in both of those positions to start with to see if we can, see what we can do.
I've had some real concerns about that. I feel like it doesn't really reflect the growth of this town and the demands that are being put on our staff. I think we need to face the fact that this town needs more staff. And we need to make that happen. I don't think you ever get the commitment out of contract staff that you do out of real employee, in-house employees. So I think we need to think long and hard about removing these positions from this budget.
Well, I'm looking for $200,000. Because we might, the thing is, we may not need that much.
So,
we
right.
just don't know.
So that, those positions in this budget total, if you add them all up in general fund, it's just short of $400,000.
But you're at the 3 policemen.
That's all.
Yeah,
Don't add those. Okay, so those other 2, that's about 160, 170.
It's a close number. Okay. Anyway, that's kind of where we are. To me, that's the most essential thing that we don't have in this current budget. And the current budget based on our revenue stream.
That's right.
So that maybe is a problem when we get the study done. that we're gonna have to address. It's hard to address when we don't have the numbers.
You know, and I've mentioned this a bunch, and that fund balance number, it's fluid, right? It moves a lot, that percentage. Every month it's different, right? Because you may have more expenditures than you have revenue. You may have more revenue than you have expenditures. So we're going to have our audit done, and we're almost at the end of this fiscal year, right? Now, with that being said, we still have to wait on some revenues. Sales tax is 3 months behind, so we really don't know what that looks like until later in the fall. But we try to project that. So when we get our audit finished, that's when we'll have kind of a set in stone number at the end of 6/30/21, 22, excuse me, what that percentage is. Last year was
Is
37.
that the marking point, the audited number?
Yeah, we try to use that number, and like I said, that it fluctuates some, but that's about as good as you can get.
So with that caveat, that we have that unknown about, because we don't know the number until the pay study is complete.
Yeah, you won't know that.
We're just gonna have to address that when the time comes and see what we can do, to make that work. It's not gonna be prudent to spend the one-time money on it. That's, we have to have some quantitative direction that we're gonna build another, whatever it may be, into the salary base. It's got to fit our revenue stream.
Well, your salary, as you're saying, the salaries are not one-time expenses, right? Because they're every year. They're cumulative.
So on the positive side, and so this isn't unusual. You do the budget, you do this portion of the budget, it's based on revenue streams, projected revenue streams, and it's just tighter because of what it is. And so that's the struggle and the tension every year. But then this is normal. And the good, and that's also, we can also be grateful we have growth in this budget.
Mm-hmm.
The towns that don't have growth, and that's tough. But we can be thankful that we have growth, and that's a good thing. But then we can also be thankful that we have between American Rescue Plan funds and 3 or 4% that we can allocate, presumably, fund balance to get us into a more reasonable place with our policy number. We have towards $3 million of one-time money.
Mm.
And that's a good message too. And we've got some things that we currently know, and then some other things to work through as to how to budget those monies. So Josh, on the one-time monies, and let's just talk about the ARP money. Do the projects need to be identified in 2 years after receipt of the funds and at least and hopefully completed within 4?
I think there's probably a couple answers to that question. I think as long as if we take all that money, like I suggested we do, and use it for salaries, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about when you spend the money. Because you spend it.
Yeah.
You've done your projects. Your project was salary offset.
I got you.
And then you have as much time as you want to do the other stuff and spend that money, because then it just goes in the fund balance.
So we're done with the time limit.
That's correct. Now, we're not done on the back end. We still have to do reporting. We have to keep up with that for like 5 years. But as far as, in this area and what we do with the money, we are done with it ARP wise.
Right. So I guess this is a question for council and you. We have a number of projects, and we've laid some out. We said those are priority, but then we still have a pretty significant amount of funds left. But this budget doesn't have this in it, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
So
It has a lot of it.
It has a lot of it.
The recommended budget does, yes. Recommended budget I recommended to you on May 26th does, yes, that's correct. It has some of that.
This one does.
Well, this thing is working, right? It's a working document. When we're talking about $241,000 of appropriation, I'm pretty much taking out every bit of that capital almost. There's a couple of things left in, but not much. Okay.
So in that 240,000, we're not looking at the gray eagle roof.
It's not in there. You can't put all that in there and keep the new positions in there and make it work. If you want to stay at appropriating 250,000. Now, if you want to appropriate more money, then of
And
course.
what percentage is the 250?
Well, 200, I don't know what that, I mean, I could do some math roughly in my head real quick, but 250 is just an average of what we've done over the past 5 years, not including COVID.
But the more significant issue is that this is based on the revenue stream. That's the stick. I mean, that's the thing that sticks. You can allocate more. You could allocate 500, 600,000, but it's one-time money, and you're digging a hole that, you've got, that you can't clear. You'd be in trouble in a few years. So
is
that's the tough part of it.
Is the program manager position and the human resources technician position in this budget?
Yes.
Okay.
The positions have not been touched out of this budget.
Okay.
Not now. The capital is what's been touched, because that's
Yeah.
one-time money.
Yeah.
I think Josh went ahead and did some of these things that, ordinarily, some of this stuff is gonna be baked in the budget, but at the same time, trucks and so forth. But at the same time, it is capital. And some of these things, if it's 5 years from now and you need a truck, then you kind of have to deal with it and figure out what to do. So I think it's realistic. I also think it's helpful for us because it gets us back to this, I think, essential part of the budget process, which is, this is a budget based on your revenue. And then fortunately, we have some capital that it gives us some breathing room. And then, it's ongoing. We don't know what will happen during the year, so.
And I think really what's, for me, I can't speak for mayor and council, but for me, what's made this budget a little more confusing is that ARP money, right? Is that discussion of that 2.6 million and how we talk about that and how that interacts with this budget. And it just gets, it gets to be confusing because if you didn't have any of that money to think about right now, you would just be thinking about, well, we've got 37% fund balance as of the end of last fiscal year. We know we have a requirement of 30 internally, so you've got, you have 7 at most you can spend without changing that requirement.
On the capital budget.
That's correct.
Right. And as a reminder, that's what the county does. They got their policy, and if they have a fund balance that gets over, their policy is do capital projects, which makes sense. I mean, that's what we're trying to say here, really.
Because once you get to a point where you're spending, where you're allocating fund balance, unassigned fund balance for operating or salaries, then you've got to think about, that's okay probably for a few years, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a time where that's probably going to have to be something that you deal with.
Well, that's arguable. It's not okay for a few years. That's why you have emergencies. That's why you have a fund balance. That's why you have your 30%, because you don't know
When something's gonna break down, or something
Yeah.
gets damaged.
But those recurring expenses, that's every
We
year.
had, for instance, COVID was our first COVID year is a great example. We had no idea, what in the world the revenue stream might be. So, all right. So from here, what do we do?
So I guess right now it's $241,000 is what's allocated, okay, based on what we're talking about today. And that means taking out most of that capital, leaving those positions in how they are right now, unless I hear differently from y'all. And then we would appropriate that capital in this budget after it's passed, essentially.
This our pool,
Yeah.
our pool of one-time money.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes some sense because especially on some of the parks and rec infrastructure, which is pretty significant amount of money that we're talking about, we wanted to do the update plan. And so that allows us to do that, and it allows us to be a little more thoughtful. And then there may be, I think without a doubt, there will be some of these expenditures that we're ready to go ahead and move it into place.
I think so.
Start letting contracts and we'll appropriate it. We'll just do that by budget amendment. I think that's the easiest
I
way.
think for staff, I think that's the easiest way to do it.
Well, I think it is for council, because we can discuss it and deliberate. I don't think we have all the information in front of us to be able to, you have a good bit, but we don't have as much as we'd like to have.
Well, yeah, and it's the timing, this has just been a terrible year for timing. We've got some new information that I don't really want to get into too much right now from school government, from an article that was last Friday about ARP money. And it's just, okay, well, here we are. Everybody's ready to finalize their budgets. And now you're telling us that there's potential for different stuff. And so it gets very confusing, and there's just not enough time to deal with it all.
Council, go ahead.
Well, there are certain things we've identified that we know we want to move forward with, that I don't think need any further discussion. And I guess it makes me feel, a little uneasy, or I guess I would prefer for that to actually be baked into the budget, even if it increases fund balance, because we're saying then at that point that, like, we've submitted these funds to do it. Instead of, I know that we're saying we're committing them, and we're gonna use them with the one-time monies, but I would prefer to see it in the budget itself. But if there's questions around the ARP funding and things like that, then I understand, we might not be able to do that. So if you could just help me understand, is there a reason we're actually not doing that?
So, I think right now, if you wanted to, we've got 37%. That's what our fund balance was at the end of last year. And that's probably a little more than that right now. And because, as I've mentioned, you hardly ever, at least here, outpace revenues with expenditures. So there's usually excess money every year. All right, and it goes back into fund balance. Right now, realistically, you could probably allocate between $700,000 and $800,000 from fund balance and still be at 30%.
Whoa, stop. You got $250,000 already, right?
Well, yes. So
Okay.
yeah. So another
you gotta add.
450 roughly.
What we were looking at last week, we had a $350,000 number. So it's like 600.
Okay.
Until you get a quantified number, what we know is 600.
Right.
But you can do that, because we know where those funds are coming from. But, it's up to council, but, it's, in the grand scheme of things, it's, with all the things we have going on, so it doesn't matter to me. We've got that, that's just part of the one-time pool. It's part of the one-time pool we can spend. It doesn't have any strings attached to it. So that's what it gets you. It gets you, let's say, 350 on top of that number. That's really what you're looking at. So 350 on top of two something. You got that 350 or something that we know at this time.
Yeah.
Is reasonable, as best we can quantify it.
So when this version versus the version that was originally presented, you pulled out some capital projects.
Yes.
That were, 250 roughly?
I could do the math, probably close. You got, the Gray Eagles pulled out. I pulled out Charlotte Street sidewalk. I pulled master plan. It's still in there.
Okay.
More of the capital, if you will, expenditure. So the master plan is really not capital, but equipment stuff. So the trucks, those have been pulled out right now. So they're not in there either. So you've really only got, as far as capital in there, just gonna look right now and tell you what it is. Public record software, which is $6,000, is still in there. That was a small enough amount where I didn't think it really would matter too much on that one. So 184, and it's been pulled out. That was really trucks and a couple other pieces of equipment. 15,000, that was pulled out from building and grounds, and that was for mower.
95,000 for Great Eagle still in here.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's over here.
Yeah, it's been, I don't have it in there right now. It's pulled out because that's when I separated this stuff based on last week's discussion. That was kind of some of that one-time stuff, so I pulled it all out so we could look at it. And that had dog park stuff in it too, croquet court fencing, basketball goals, So really, there's not really much capital at all in this budget right now, as it stands.
I would prefer to put that back in, and to, I think we know we're gonna do it. Things like fixing fencing is, in a truck, if we need that stuff, we're gonna do it. I don't see a reason to pull it out myself.
Based on, Josh went down the list at the very beginning of the meeting and gave us the projects that were previously built into the budget. And if I did my long addition correctly, it's $568,000 if you pull that in the budget. That is, and I'll list it out again, 95.8, I don't know what project that is.
That was Great Eagle.
85,000,
Truck,
52.5,
truck,
42,000,
van,
26,000,
truck,
60,000,
rec, master plan,
15,000, 32,000,
Bank Boulevard,
65,000,
it's a sidewalk,
75,000,
fire services.
20,000.
But the 15th, the rec plan's still in there, correct?
60,000 rec plan.
So, I mean, I think that's kind of the full council. It's not that we aren't gonna do these
Yeah,
things.
it's still.
It's when and how you want to do it, and you might not be able to get all of these in there. Because you need that $250,000, just, for mechanical reasons to make the budget work, if you will. So you can get some of these in there, and I don't think that's unrealistic, but it's just a timing issue, council. It's up to you, Josh does need your direction on it, if you can give it to him today.
Yeah, if you can give it to me today, it would be nice. What I would want to do is try to, if we can, call for a public hearing at the end of this meeting for a date set in the future, before July 1st, of course. But I mean, I think we're there. I just need to get your direction to finalize it. We'll get it all put together, and then of course we'll have the public hearing, so we'll have it all in there.
But if I could make a recommendation, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, let's just set the public hearing during that last week, the last 4 days of the month. They're all business days, all work days, at a day that suits council, and maybe Savannah can poll everybody and see if they can decide now.
So you've got Monday through Thursday, and every one of those days, it's 27, 28, 29, 30. So you've got 4 days.
So they probably should do the public hearing at 5 o'clock, if that's agreeable to council. Is that okay? And how about the 30th?
I was just gonna say, I would like to avoid the 30th.
Yeah, let's please not do the 30th, unless you just want to. We may need to go. We all need to go have a beer after that one.
I'm gonna call for jury duty, so I don't really starting then. So,
The
yeah.
30th at 11 p.m.
Maybe 10:30.
How about Tuesday?
Yeah.
Tuesday the 28th.
Looks great.
That works.
And at 5 p.m.
Council's 5 p.m. sound good? But that gives us some working time if we need it. If not, it's okay too. Right. Any other, well, got some direction,
Yeah.
Josh. And if you don't right now, that's okay. You don't have to provide it right now, but maybe as we gather next week on the 16th, think that through. And
So are we going to, I guess that's another thing for me to get right here, make sure I'm right. We're going to have another budget meeting next week on the 16th.
that's up to council.
You all
But
want
I'm
to have
just
a
saying,
meeting?
if you'd like another week to kind of ponder what we've spoken about today,
I'm out of town, so
you're not gonna be here. Okay. Well, if you're not gonna be here, but you want your opinion, you can't have a vote if you're not here, but your opinion, no, we could do that. The other thing is to do it now.
Yeah.
I think I'm more in Doug's camp on this and putting these items in the budget. We know we're gonna do it. If it means appropriating some fund balance, we know we have that room. Most of the ones that were in there, although they are capital, they're not one time. I mean, they're like the truck. You're replacing the truck every 5 years. Operational, really. So there's nothing that was in there, like the cans aren't in there. But we know that's something, that's a whole different category. So I like the idea of having sort of regular operational in there. I understand their capital, but that to me makes more sense.
I kind of like to wait on the rollout cans anyway until we've had a chance to talk about our waste reduction, so that makes sense to.
When the rollout cans are in,
Yeah.
they were already built in.
Right.
The list that I called out earlier is one. Let me go back through that again, Josh, okay? You call it, you can do that. Okay, 95,800 was for what?
That's Gray Eagle.
Gray Eagle, 85,000,
That's for an F-450 truck,
52,500,
an F-250 truck.
42,000,
That's the passenger van for recreation,
26,000,
truck for recreation.
60,000.
That's already in the budget.
That's,
I did not pull that out.
okay, that's it.
That's under a different line item.
Right, 15,000,
15,000 is the mower.
32,000.
That's Bike Boulevard, which is still in the budget. It's in there right
That's
now.
in.
Yeah.
We're not always around.
I thought the 15 was the Craigmont park.
Is that in or out?
Boy.
You had,
You put a portion of it.
you put 160, but you said.
We had, I was going back and forth with different budgets. So the 15,000 was in my budget message for the recommended budget originally for Craigmont Park. Yes. It is not in the one with the
It's not
241.
in the current budget. Okay, 65,000.
That's the Charlotte Street sidewalk.
75
That's fire services fund. That's the chief truck.
and 20.
It's an ATV.
So, very reoccurring, except for Gray Eagle at almost 100,000 and the sidewalk at 65. And I think if you pull those out and put those back in our one-time budget, we have money for them. But you're closer to that 350 to 400,000 of projects. And we're trying to spend down 4% or so, and you're about there based on what we know now. So is council agreeable with that?
Say it so specific.
Just move Gray Eagle 95,800 and move, Charlotte Street sidewalks, which are 65,000.
Out of the offer.
Yeah, just keep them in the one-time monies, which we're gonna allocate later and do the amendments for. And that gets this number down to closer to our 4% that we want to out. We can spend out of current fund balance because we have a little excess. So I would propose that to council if that sounds, just not that we're not gonna do it, just it makes this budget work, makes our general fund budget work.
And we'll address the trucks and so on.
No, I'm thinking it's the truck's in there now. That's why I understand
We're
that.
planning on leaving everything in the budget, moving it back in, except for Gray Eagle and the sidewalks. And we're gonna do them, but we're just gonna do them out of our one-time money and make budget amendments. Along with trash cans, along with everything else. Yeah, that we'd be spending our 2.6 or so.
That's right.
Really our ARP funds.
Which we have a million spoken for.
Yeah, we're down to spending our ARP funds, 2.6 in ARP funds. Which is, I think that's good, sounds fine. But anyway, we have to move those two items out to make it work.
So when can we do that? Like, let's say great, let's use that again. When could we actually?
I think we can do what we need to do. As soon as this budget's passed, July 1st, they're looking at Tammy, we can make that happen, get that money transferred and paid out for salaries, and go ahead and get it contracted and get it rolling.
As long as the board. If the board comes up with a list of everything it wants to use, we can move that money, the whole amount, whether the salaries have been used for 2023 or not. So if we want to do the whole 2.6 million July 1st or July 2nd, we can go ahead and appropriate this funds and move it into general fund and say, okay, we're going to use it on Great Eagle, we're going to use it on the sidewalk, we're going to use it wherever at that point.
So this is a little different story. Is this because of my communication back with Erica? Yeah. So the council needs to know this, but, because it's different than what we've spoken about. Right? But we found out from Erica Anderson at Land and Sky, you can go back to March of 21.
Yes, that's right.
We don't want to go back.
So you can go to March. Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, let me finish, please. And so we can go back and we've got, we don't have to wait until we extend money on salaries this year. And so it kind of makes it a lot easier.
So why don't we want to go back and?
If you're going back to March of 21 salaries, the current department heads or the current employees have to sign off that they worked those positions, they worked those salaries, and it is for that time period. And
Well, I think we need to clear this up. We just need to clear this up. I heard this last night for the first time, and so we
Me
don't
too.
know.
Yeah,
We
me
don't
too.
know.
Yeah,
There's no way in the
so
world we
if
could know.
we're allocating based on 22 salaries is what I was suggesting. We can go ahead and allocate that money based on, or 23 salaries based on the new year's budget. We can do that. We can do that allocation based on that. If the board has a list on what they want to spend it on at that time, that is what it says. But if we're doing it on salaries, at any point, we have to have that certification that the department heads, the employees, someone has to certify that they have worked during this time.
It's just not what Erica told me last night, so.
Well, there's just, I know what she said, and like I said, that email or the article came out from the School of Government last Friday from Kara about this whole issue. So we haven't had time to look at it. But I think I think what Erica said is right. You can go back to March 2021. That's fine. I think the other part of that is just the construction of how you do that.
Yeah.
Of what you have to do to make that work. Because you're in March 2021 is the year it's been closed out already.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Budget wise.
but we don't have to extend the money on salaries just when we come to January 1 and we can, because that's what we were talking about last week.
Yeah, you're not expending it on salaries, you are just putting it towards general fund balance. You're saying we are just reimbursing ourselves, but it is not having to go back into a salary line at all. And going back to March of 21, they're allowing municipalities to do that because a lot of smaller municipalities will not have salary expenses in a current year to equal up to what they're getting on the funds. So they wouldn't be able to use those money left for salaries.
Well, if all that, okay, well then that's all good news.
Yeah, no, it's nothing bad about it.
It's even simpler than it was.
Yeah, I would just prefer not to go back because a lot of, we have different department heads in place and we don't have some of those employees in place. And I would hate for them to sign off on something saying they're certifying to something they were not here.
Well, there's no reason to.
So, if they're signing off on it at the, quarterly or yearly even for the upcoming fiscal year, I feel better about that, even as a department head myself, because I can control it better because, yes, the reporting is easier for salaries, but there's still a lot that we have to keep up with.
So even current salaries, you still have to have department heads sign off.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't, because we don't have the same employee group.
Yeah, because I'm not gonna have every employee sign this form. I mean, that's
This ARP
a
has
lot.
changed. It
But
changed
anyway,
everything.
and this just came out,
I mean, like I said, the school government did an article last Friday on it.
well, so it makes it even easier. That's what it amounts to.
Yeah, and it's still a lot of reporting and also if we recognize that money this year and put that into our budget
or into our fund balance for this year, that could open us up for single audit, and they said, well, you can take an exemption, well, I don't know what that entails, then you have to talk to the auditor and say, well, can we do these?
So just so council understands, as of July 1, the money's
Yes,
free, we just need to do that.
Just come up with.
But you still need to have department heads sign off.
Well,
You
I'll
just
have
have
to,
to sign off one time or quarterly.
they can do it yearly, but I would probably get them to do it maybe quarterly or even monthly, just, you don't know what will change. And so, just so they're aware of, yes, my employees worked, this month and they were here and they did these duties, and I would feel better having that. But, as long as the board comes up with a list saying, yes, we want to spend 2.6 million on these projects, I can do that. Or if they come up with a list of smaller items, we can move it.
Oh,
So we don't need the full 2.6. Okay. So then I'm comfortable with us moving the trucks and the kind of, the things operational one-time expenses into the budget, into the current budget, and then things like, the Gray Eagle or whatever, if it was the July meeting, we can go ahead and. And allocate it then.
Yeah, just
Absolutely.
specifically Gray Eagle and the
And
sidewalk. Yeah, that kind of gets us there.
And then we can continue the discussion on other projects.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, works for me. And I think that, this could get so, it just gets real confusing. And like I said again, this money, it's a good thing. I mean, and don't get me wrong, it's just the timing of it, how you spend it, the changes that come every month or every other week, this gets confusing.
Yeah.
But I think sounds like I'm getting the
Yes,
information.
I think you do. I'll just go down. Councilman Christie? Just, in favor of moving these
Yes,
two out?
yes, I am.
Hay, Tiller, Stone,
Yes.
King. All right, you got your direction.
All right, so, good. And we're doing the public hearing on the 28th, right? At 5 o'clock? June 28th, 5 o'clock.
There you go.
See you at 5 o'clock today.
Was a good work session.
Thank you.
Anybody else, council, anybody? Meeting adjourned.